So, I forgot to charge my laptop, so I'm running on just battery power. So that means no webcam today, but that's all right. So, as always, we'll bring up the application architecture and talk through that real quick, and then we can get started. So. Um, so what we've done so far, we've defined the top level supervisor that acts as the conduit adapter. So it provides, uh, so it receives two things and it is responsible for another thing. So the two things it receives are the topology and the subscribers. So we built setup, which is a process that takes the topology and generates all of the queues in SQS. Then we take the subscribers and set up pollers that are listening to the queues that were set up in SQS. And yesterday we did the work to basically set up the supervision queues, um, or sorry, the supervisors for all of the workers. So we started to do some simple implementation of the worker, um, but we're going to do a little bit more, something more complex there, and then we're going to start looking at how we can set up this subscription here. And so to do that, we're likely going to create a supervisor, which actually I should add here. Sorry, not a supervisor, a um, registry. And I guess that's it. Just an additional registry there. So with that, we're going to get started. So here we received all of the. So this is us defining handle events, which is what will get called whenever our demand is, I guess, handled in the producer. So this is a consumer here, and oh, actually, I'm noticing. Oh yeah, sorry. So this is a consumer here. So it says, hey, I can handle 5,000 of these things. And so the producer is then going to try and produce 5,000 of those things. And then whenever it produces anything, handle events is called, and we'll get a list of messages that we can process. Yesterday, I realized, oh, I don't actually need all the options that I was passing down through the supervision hierarchy. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is clean that up a little bit. So one thing, I don't need the adapter ops because we're not doing anything to talk to. Actually, you know what? I'll need the adapter ops to act the messages. But I shouldn't need the subscriber ops because those are handled by conduit itself to get passed to the subscriber. I don't need the subscriber because that's also handled by conduit. I do need the name and I do need the broker. So actually, one thing I do want to check though is whenever we're setting up the polar, we're not doing anything special to name it after polar supervisor. Name it after yeah, okay, so good. we are not naming this after the I can't think today, the subscriber. So the reason that's important is because then that means I don't actually need to know the subscriber over here to be able to here. I don't need to know the subscriber here to be able to talk to that producer. So I don't need that. I don't need this. So we just need those three options. So we can get rid of that. And we can get rid of these two here. And adapter ops. Right. So that looks good there. So let's go up the supervision hierarchy now and remove those extra settings that we're not using. That's the test I want to look at. The worker supervisor shouldn't need these, so we can get rid of those. And then, so args will get passed through as is. Subops. Oh, so I guess we need the subops there. So actually, let's undo that real quick. We won't need the subscriber. But we will need the subops. We just shouldn't pass them through. So we're going to change this from just being args like it was to being just the things we need here. So broker, name, and ops. Cool. So now we want to go to the worker group supervisor and just make sure that we're not passing anything extra here that we don't need. So we do need to iterate over the subscribers, but we only need the name. We don't need the actual subscriber itself. So we can underscore that, and we can just not pass it here. So the way we're naming this is by the worker supervisor and then the subscriber. So we can just change this to name, and that should then work. So let's run our tests because those are going to break after these changes. Okay, so let's see. So this is worker supervisor test 6. Here. And on the first line, so we're passing an extra argument here that we don't need. So we can get rid of that. We should get a different failure, I believe, for that now. Yeah, so we changed passing the module itself for passing the atom, so we should just do that. So test 2. So that's, oh, sorry, that's a different test though. This is a worker group supervisor test. So here, instead of passing the module, we're passing an atom. And we're not passing the module there anymore. So now we just have the one test to fix. So in this test, we're no longer passing these two arguments. So we can get rid of those. And we're good. So let's add all that and check that in. So remove passing of unnecessary arguments. There we go. Alright, so now we can close these because we won't need to look at them for a little bit. Just close everything and then open the worker. So the worker here is responsible for going through each of the messages and calling broker.receives on each of those messages. It's also responsible for acking those, which in SQS's case means deleting them from the queue, or knacking them, which I think in SQS's case just means not doing anything with them. So what I'm going to look at is what receives does, because I forget if it actually rescues exceptions for me. Right, so receives doesn't do anything to rescue exceptions, so we're going to have to do that ourselves. So just to inline here, I'm going to do try do and rescue. So I want so in the case of an error, what do I want to do? I want to actually, you know what? I just realized I want to do this per message, not all messages together. So let's, right now we'll just define a function down here, which is just process message. And that's going to receive a name and a message. And it's going to have a rescue. And in that rescue, it's going to return an error. And then we're just going to return an error. And then here we're going to do, we're going to need the broker as well. So now we can do broker.receives name message. And if that's successful, then we're interested in acking or knacking that message. The fact that it raised an error is not the only case that matters here. So actually, let's do case on this. So whenever we get back a message that is that has status ack, then we are going to return a tuple with ack and the message. We want to do equals message here. Let's abbreviate that. And then we can also receive a message with status knack. And so that we're going to do knack here, message, and then we're going to do a similar thing for the error case. We're going to knack those as well. We're going to use the message that was passed into this, and yeah, so that should be good. Now let's see. So once we've done that, we can, instead of calling this, we can call our own function here, process message. I'll get name and the message and the broker. So all right, so we're going to turn this into a pipeline and map that. All right. So now we're going to have a list of tuples with ack and knack in them. And we're interested in specifically the ones that have ack in them, so that we can basically remove them from remove them from the queue. So we want ack. Is there a better way to do this? I want to. This way will work, but so knack underscore, that's going to be false. So now we have a list with just the acks, and then we can so basically we want to turn those into a list of the I forget what they're called, but essentially we can do a optimization here where we delete all of the messages that have been processed in a single request rather than in multiple requests. So let's find the function we want. So we want delete message batch. So that's going to take a queue and message receipts, which are delete message batch items. So that's an ID with binary and handle, receipt handle. So I know what this is. This I'm thinking maybe is the message ID. Let's just go double check that. So delete message batch. Those are the errors, response elements, request parameters. Oh, are these just client IDs? Interesting. Okay. So those seem to be just IDs for our benefit, but not necessarily something we need for uh, doing any real work. Um, so we filtered those out, so we only have the acts. We're going to want to map those, but we should also just give them an index since we have to um, send them with some sort of ID. So now we can do enum.map. Let's see, so fun. We're going to get ack and message, and then we're going to get an index. So I'm just going to wrap that. All right, so now what we want to generate is maps according to this guy here. We want to generate a list of maps. And the map should have an ID, which we're, oh, it wants a binary there, not a number. That's fine. And then a receipt handle, which is also binary. So receipt handle is present on the message itself. So that's one of the things that we put on there when we pulled it off the queue. And then the ID, I think we can just use the message ID because those should be unique. So let's get rid of this index bit. So we just get ack in the message, and then we can do ID will be get header message ID, and then the receipt handle will be get header message and receipt handle. And we can just double check that that's how we put them there. So let's go to SQS. This guy here. So we do this. So to conduit message, we get message ID, and we put message ID as a header, and receipt handle we do the same thing. I'll go copy this here just so in case I've misspelled it. Cool. So these functions won't be available here. I'm going to pull this out because I don't think this should be inside of this module. I just want to sort of work through the functionality, and then eventually I'll actually put it somewhere that will do this. So the result of this is, what does the library call it? Delete message batch item. Okay. I don't like that name, so um, I'm going to call them delete. Yeah, let's just call them delete items. All right. So then, with that set of delete items, we can do SQS dot so it's x_aws dot SQS dot delete message batch. Once a queue, so um, uh, hmm. So it should be the case that the worker actually, you know what? I'm not sure about that. Um, so it may be the case that a worker can subscribe to multiple queues, and so the messages that are here may be from different queues. So we should ensure that we're telling it to delete from the right queue. So I think to handle that, I just want to partition by the source. It's not partition. Group by. So I want to group each of the messages here. I can also simplify this act bit with the second function here, but I want to group each of the messages by their source. So I can do message.source here. And then we can pass another function, which is going to do, so that's going to get same thing, element ack and message, and we can just return the message. So now what we'll be getting here instead is well, actually we can do this part here as well. So we can just do this here. So now what we have for delete items is a list of queue to list of messages to delete. And so then we can do, actually, so maybe we don't need this delete items anymore. We can actually just do enum dot each here. It'll be each just because we don't care about the result anymore. So then we'll get function, and so the first item will be the queue, and the second item will be the delete message items. And so then we can call this guy with the queue and delete message items. All right, and then, so that's not sufficient though. The reason it's not sufficient is because we actually need to call. So that built a request, but we need to call request. And here, I don't want that to fail. And we need the ops, the adapter ops, here to make this request. So we're going to pass that in there. And then, yeah, we can respond with no reply empty listen state, and that should be good. So let's pull this out. So this part where I'm doing the delete, I'd like to move that into SQS, this module here. And the part where I am doing the processing itself, I'd like to put somewhere else as well, just so it's not inside of the Gen server. Oh, hi, Demuse and Hogbo. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, so this should probably work, but it's too complex for existing here. So let's take all of this out, and let's create a new module for that. So what should this be called? I'm just going to call it message processor for right now. That should be a function. So let's call it process, and so we need broker name and messages. And ops. All right. Then we need to take this function with us. And I'd like to take let's see. I would like to take part of this and actually move it to SQS. I would like SQS to be sort of aware of this sort of contract where I've said act this message or knack this message. and SQS can then just go through and run those things. So I think that means that it's at this point that SQS would handle it. So let's take that out. And here we can do sorry, just reading messages. Hi, Monkey. I have to go to bed now, but hope to drop in again another time. I'm pretty much a beginner. All the best with your streaming. Thanks, Demos. Are you someone I know in real life, or are you just stopping by? So now I want to alias conduit SQS SQS. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for stopping by. Actually, if wrote a quick question before you go. If the stream were at a different time, what would be the best time for you to catch it? So here we're going to then let's see. So we would need to ack messages. Like that. And then here. Okay. Where at near you are you? Also, don't let me keep you if you really do need to go. Oh, cool. Telefonieren in Deutschland ist wirklich nicht schwer. Du hebst den Horn ab, steckst uns in den Apparat und wählst die Nummer. Das ist alles. Yeah, I'm super proud about having learned that at one point in my high school career. Alright, so here I'm acking the messages. So I'm taking the message results. We're doing the filter based on whether or not they're ack or knack. So then we group by the act messages. Oh wait, that's gonna... Oh, sorry, no, we already filtered it. So then we're gonna group by the message source and then map the message to a delete message item. Oh, yeah, that's pretty funny. So now, let's see. So we map those to delete message items, and then for each of those, so then that produces a map of queue to delete message items. We map through each of those. For each of the queues, we delete the message items, and then we make the request. Okay, so I think that will do everything. Cool. So now our handle events message needs to call that. So we're going to alias conduit SQS message processor here, and then we can do message processor.process messages, and that's all we need. Actually, so we're going to write a test for this. And in writing the test for this, we're going to not actually want to call message processor. So we're going to need to be able to mock that. So we're going to use inject instead. So message processor. And in order to get that function, we need to import injects. Okay, and then we can change this to message processor. And then that should be functionally the same. All right, so let's write a test for all this stuff. All right, so worker test. Oh, we've already got one. What was that test? Nothing. All right, so let's fill this out. Conduit SQS worker test do. So we can use xunit case. Async, we want that to be true here because we're not doing anything that has shared state. We're going to describe init 1. And then test. So what happens in the init for the worker? So we're gonna want to test that we're a consumer, that we set up the state, and that our subscribe to is filled out correctly. And we'll expand that later once we actually start doing the subscribe to bit. So let's see. So we're testing that. It sets itself as a consumer, sets up state, and subscribes to the polars. So now we can just alias that module. So conduit SQS worker, and then we can do worker.init. And then we need to pass the arguments to it. So broker, name, and ops. So those can be broker, name, and we'll just do an empty list for ops at this point. And then we can assert that the result is equal to the tuple with consumer as the first argument, and then the worker state. And that's going to have broker, name, and ops. I think that's adapter ops here. Ops. And then subscribe to is going to be blank for now, but we'll fill that out later. Subscribe to. That's just going to be empty list. That's right. All right, so let's run tests for that. We failed. So we failed because of syntax error in worker 4. Worker 4. Let's see. Next error before conduit SQS. Oh, forgot a comma. Okay, new errors. So message process should be message processor. Let's rename that message processor. And then message processor. I must have forgotten to pass along some stuff. So line 5, messages. So that should be messages. And then next one, SQS 59. SQS 59. Ops. I forgot to pass ops here. So let's fix that. Message processor. We have ops, and we just need to pass them here. And then, so that was that one. So here, saying undefined function get header. So I forgot to import conduit message here. And, oh, actually, sorry, not here. Here. I need to import conduit message. And here I'm using message. So I'm going to need to alias conduit message here. I see you're sticking around, D-Moose. Am I saying that right? Oh, guess not. Okay, more errors. So message processor 18. We're not using this error, so let's get rid of that. Workers not using broker. Whoa. Uh-oh. Run into that memory thing that happens sometimes. So worker is not using broker on line 22. Broker. Oh, yeah. Definitely need to pass more stuff there. So it's broker, name, messages, and ops. Alright. So that fixed all those. And then act messages 2 is undefined or private. That's because we were using the wrong arity. So now message processor 18 expected 1 arg. Oh, fair enough. So we need to specify something here, so we can just do underscore since we're not using the value. All right. Act messages 2 is undefined. Did you mean act message? So does that mean that this one should be act messages? Yeah. Cool. And then variable ops is missing. Worker test exs 12. All right. Yeah, we didn't define that, so that should just be empty list. Cool. We're getting closer. I wrote subscriber 2. So that's, I'm pretty sure, wrong. Yeah, so that should be subscribe. I made that error twice, so I corrected it once. And then we have passing. Cool. So that got us past all the errors. We have tests now for the worker. Well, just the init for the worker. So we should test the other bit, but that should be relatively minor. So let's describe handle events. And is it 2? It's 3. Alright, so we do handle events, and then we can do a test. So basically, since we're not doing a whole lot here, we can just test essentially that we're calling this process, and then we can assert that we're producing some state. So in order to do that, we can just define a module called message processor. And that's going to have a function called process, and that's going to take the broker name, messages, and ops. And we can just send to ourselves a message with process and then those options. And then we can test it processes and messages. That's good enough. So here we're going to import injects test, and we're going to then use override, which is provided by injects test there. So we can do let's see, worker, and we're going to override the message processor function to return our message processor that we define in this test instead of the one that production code would use. So then we can just call worker.handle events, and so we're just going to generate a message here. So let's alias conduit message, and then we can just do percent message here. So that will be a list of messages, and then from, we can just give self, it doesn't matter here. And then the state, so we're going to generate some new state here. So let's just say state, and then we'll just define that right above here. Alright, so this is going to have broker, so worker state broker name, let's go to name, and messages, subscriber ops. We're just going to do an empty list for that. Okay, so now we've called handle events, and we can assert that that returns okay, or no reply, empty list, and then our state. We should do double equals. Cool. And then we can also then assert that we received a message, which will just be a process broker name, our messages here. Let's pull those up. Messages, which we're going to pin, and ops, which will just be an empty list. So if we run that, that should work. Nope. Worker test 32. Oops. Messages. So we failed. Oh, it's called adapter apps, not subscriber apps. Cool. So now we have tested the worker. We can now test the message processor. So let's add a test for that. Oops. So conduit, SQS, message, processor, test, do, so use xunit, case, so we're going to do this one async true as well, describe, process slash for, I think, yeah, for do. Alright, so we're going to test. So we want to sort of test 3 different scenarios here. One, we call this and we get an ack back. We call it, we get an ack back, and then we call it and we get an exception. So so let's test each of those scenarios. So process for when processing produces an ack. Hey, Frigid Code. Let me know if you have any questions. So when processing produces an ack, we want to, let's see, so whenever processing the message produces an ack, we want that to return a list with an ack and the message. It produces a tuple with ack. All right, um, so let's generate a broker that has a receives and an incoming scope. So we can just do inside this test broker so we can use conduit broker, and we're going to do incoming. So we need to provide a module here, so we can just say foo do, and then subscribe bar BAS, then just the options. I have to double check this, I forget. So here we can do incoming module. So let's copy that. Actually, yeah, let's just take this whole thing, because this is a better example than what we were generating anyways. So let's get rid of that. And we don't need this pipe through here. Okay. So that gives us a broker that we can use here. And we should alias our module that we're testing, message processor. So now we can do a message processor dot process. We'll give it a broker, a name, so that'll be setup billing here, and some messages that we want it to process. Actually, we should do this as acker ackable, and then we can, that way we can use this same broker for each of our different scenarios. All right, so now, error. Errorable. No, I'm just gonna call it error. Error. And just from errorable. So it should be less. I'm not sure why they're not in that README. I need to fix that. So now we got our broker, my app, and then let's just define these in here. So def module accurate. It needs to be my app accurate. I forget. I'm going to go look at the test for this. So here we define a broker in a test. It lists out the full module for the test itself, and then says my app, and then that works like that. Okay. All right. So that's doable. So we just need to do this whole thing here. And then we can define subscribers that will do the various things. So def module, my app, acker. So that's going to use conduit subscriber, and then we can do def process message and ops to, and we can just return the message since they're automatically act by default. And then we can do the same thing for the other two cases. So here we're going to have knacker. So knacker, we just want to knack the message. So knack here is provided by us using conduit subscriber. And then my app dot error do. So we just want to do this. And we actually don't need the message here, because we're just going to raise an exception. So that should be those three cases, and we just need one message in here for testing this. So we can pass that as messages, and then the ops here don't particularly matter for this particular test. So one thing that will happen is it will eventually pass the results of that test to SQS act messages, but we don't want to do that in this test, so we're going to import injects and then just inject SQS here, and it'll be conduit SQS.SQS. And then we can replace this with just the function call SQS, like so. And so now we can override that in the test. So let's do that real quick. Up here we're going to import injects test, and that gives us this override function. Technically a macro, I guess. The message processor, we can say SQS should be our own implementation. So let's just define a module for that. Okay. What function are we calling on that? We are calling act messages, and we're passing the results. So def act messages results and ops do. So we're going to send to ourselves a message act messages results and ops. That way we can just receive that message in the test here. So we'll call some code. That code will eventually call this, which will send our test a message that we can listen for. Okay. So now we want to call acker here. And we want to, we don't particularly care about the result of this function, so I'm not going to worry about that. But we do want to be able to assert that we received the message up above. So we should get ack messages, and the result should be a list of a list of maps with ID and some binary here and a receipt handle. Which we need to define on our message. So we should actually, let's do it like this. So let's say message equals that message where we put a header message ID, which is what we're using to generate that ID. So let's just say 1. And then we want to put a header for receipt handle. And that's going to get a value. It doesn't matter, so we'll just make one up. And then instead of messages there, we can just pass a list with message in it. So now this should be 1, this should be DJ, and let's run a test. Alright, oh, forgot to give it an OTP app. OTP, yeah. There we go. No function clause matching and injects test override through. What did I mess up there? Oh, I didn't finish writing it. I want that to be SQS. SQS points to SQS do. There we go. Alright, message struct is not defined, so that just means I need to alias conduit message. So we need to import conduit message as well, so that we can use all the helper functions that are provided on that. Alright, we did not get the message we expected. We got a different message. Alright, so what I generated was what I expect the message, what I expect to send to SQS directly, but not what I should call it to conduit SQS. So I need to fix the worker test to reflect that. Wait, not worker test. message processor test. So this should actually be just ack. I'm going to write it as a tuple just because that's how I'm generating it. Ack with message there. And we want to pin that since we're doing a pattern match inside of assert received. Okay. So that's it match, and the reason is because looks like the source is set on one and is not set on the other. So let's put the source. And it looks like these aren't lists like I thought they were. So now source is ackable on both. Status is ack. User ID nil. Oh, I'm seeing the options. Cool. So now we can duplicate this test for the other scenarios. Too far. So one situation is when processing produces a knack, it produces a tuple with knack. So we want to change this to knack, change this to knacker, and knackable here. And then, so knackable, all that's fine. I actually don't need this stuff here, so I'm going to get rid of that. And then for this one, when processing produces an error, it produces a tuple with knack. We do the same stuff. This is going to be errorable. These guys can go away. And so this should be error, and this should be knack. So if we did everything right, passes first try. Nope. Of course. So which one is this to be doing? So when processing produces a knack. Okay. Oh right, we can't just pin this because the message should have a knack in it. So let's do new message here and assert let's assert that new message is equal to message with status set to knack. Cool. So we've tested all of that functionality. Now we want to actually test the SQS bit here. That's deleting the messages. So let's take a look at that and close these guys for now. So I added this function that takes message results, which will be in the form of tuples with ack in the message or knack in the message. And then this is just going to filter them out, group them by queue, and then map the messages to what SQS expects for deleting, and then just goes through and deletes those each batch from SQS. So let's see, what's the best way to do this? Also, I should already have a message there from some of the other tests, but I kind of want to actually just create some messages on SQS. The annoying thing there is then I have to actually pull them and then call this to delete them. I kind of don't want to do that right now, so I'm going to do a simpler test of just deleting them, deleting the ones I've already created. I can create more messages just by, well, I don't want to do that either. All right, let's look at this SQS test. So describe ack messages for ack messages too. Hey, frigid code, is all this making sense? Okay, so we want to test deletes act messages and ignores non-act. Well, just knacked messages. So in here we're calling this client. I don't know, I kind of want to move this stuff to the message subscriber and test this functionality there rather than test it with just deleting the messages. Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm going to change this to message batches. And then we can just enumerate over those here. And then inside of message processor, we'll inject some steps. Like so. And then so now our test should fail and we can fix them. Oops. Oh. Uh-oh. My